In 1997, I told my best friend that we should go see that new Volcano movie, the one where the heroic male lead battles know-nothing bureaucrats in a quest to save a town from an impending catastrophic eruption. You know, Dante's Peak.
98% of the time they're just false alarms.
And the other 2%?
The next year, he was in the mood for something a little different, so we decided to go watch the new 3D animated film about a quirky ant who defies conventions, saves his colony, and falls in love with a princess. A Bug's Life. Finally, we decided to see something spooky in 1999, so we jumped at the chance to see the new scary movie about the group of people who have to stay in a haunted house for an extended period of time, aka The Haunting.
It's not about them. It's about family. It's always been about family.
There's always room for family.
And of course, you couldn't enter the new millennium without having first seen the Mars movie, where humans have to battle harsh elements and technology to potentially settle on the Red Planet. And of course, I'm talking about Mission to Mars. In the span of 4 years between 1997 and 2000, there were a minimum of 7 big-budget Hollywood films which were released within a year, months, or even weeks of a film, which was bizarrely similar, some of them feloniously so. Growing up around this time, I started to think that this was just how big blockbuster films worked. I thought maybe studios just sort of figured out their themes for the year together, like gentlemen choosing pistols or swords at dawn. Then whichever film was better would blast the other in the face. But no, it turns out this idea is generally a pretty bad one. Blockbuster films are expensive to make, and there's a real risk that releasing one right next to another will divide the audience. Why bother seeing Drop Zone, starring Wesley Snipes, when you've already blown your load on the skydiving crime action genre less than 3 months earlier with Charlie Sheen's Terminal Velocity? Both just awful, awful films.
Is that the kind of person I am? A hawk?
Of course, there are some production houses that do exactly this on purpose, intentionally releasing a film which bears a striking resemblance to another as close to its release date as possible. The difference is, in that case, it's less of a duel at dawn and more of a remora suctioning onto a whale shark type situation. These tend to be smaller, low-budget studios that make a movie resemble a larger budget one, at least on the box art, in the hope that some small but significant amount of people who want to see, say, Alien vs. Predator might instead be cunningly tricked into grabbing Alien vs. Hunter instead. Incidentally, this is the same subsection of people who once made eating Tide Pods a national conversation.
It started out as a joke, and it's gone too far.
This is the domain of The Asylum, a studio so notorious for this practice that there is an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to their cloned films. They've made such classics as Transmorphers, Ape vs. Monster, Ghost Hunters, and Snakes on a Train. Besides The Asylum or other studios like Golden Films, which used to do the same thing just with animation.
Good morning, sir.
Most production houses want to avoid conflicting with each other. If they do conflict, there's no guarantee being the first one to release will net you the big payday either. Charlie Sheen's Terminal Velocity may have been #1 on the calendar, but it was a major flop financially compared to Drop Zone, which actually didn't do that well either. Again, just terrible films. Studios are so afraid of these sorts of conflicts that they will sometimes go to extreme lengths to avoid them. In 1973, rather than go head-to-head with their competing "This Giant Building is on Fire" movies, Warner Brothers and Fox decided to pull a fusion dance and combine their resources to create The Towering Inferno. They shared everything: production costs, revenues, and even the characters in their respective stories got smooshed together. This unique setup was wildly successful, which does beg the question why it doesn't happen more often. More on that later. So why then, if they're so detrimental, do these kinds of pairings seem to pop up all the time? Rob Roy and Braveheart, 1995. Troy and Alexander, 2004. The Prestige and the Illusionist, 2006. No Strings Attached and Friends with Benefits, 2011. Olympus Has Fallen and White House Down, 2013, 2 movies, both about terrorist attacks on the White House, released 4 months apart. What is going on? Although damn, Morgan Freeman's movie made twice as much as Channing Tatum's. Guess you don't go head-to-head with Morgan Freeman and expect to win. Unless you're Bruce Willis! These kinds of movies are known as sister films, dueling films, or more commonly, twin films. They're a phenomenon nearly as old as film itself, with twins popping up here and there going back to Hollywood's golden age. Jezebel and Gone with the Wind were 1938 and 9's twin examinations of charming but self-destructive Southern belles hopelessly in love amidst a national catastrophe. Dr. Strangelove and Failsafe were 1964's twin entries dealing with an American bomber unilaterally starting a nuclear apocalypse. Black Sunday and 2 Minute Warning were 1976 and 7's twin commentary on terrorists attacking the Super Bowl. What the fuck? What was going on in the late 70s? Oh man. So anyway, you can search all over to find examples of twin films, with some periods having many more than others, the late 90s being an example of a period saturated by them. But then, you come upon a year like no other. 1989. And all of a sudden, it's like none of the others even matter. In 1 year, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 undersea sci-fi horror thriller movies were released. 6 if you expand just a few months into 1990. For some reason, 1989 was the ultimate sister film year. In order: DeepStar 6, January 13th. Leviathan, March 17th. Lords of the Deep, April 21st. The Evil Below, July 1st. The Abyss, August 9th. And if you really want to get crazy, you can add The Little Mermaid to that list, which came out November 17th that year. But The Little Mermaid, I hear you say. How could that be a monster movie? Are you really telling 5-year-old me this isn't an undersea monster movie? Okay, fine, but I'm swapping in 1990's The Rift as an honorary 1989 film in its place. If the late 90s ask us to politely consider a clear pattern in Hollywood filmmaking, then this hyper-concentrated 15-month span of undersea pictures are a giant bobbing buoy begging to be investigated. How in the world did this happen? What led to this wild oversaturation of salty screenplays? How, in such a risk-averse industry, can you find a singular year more crammed with fish flicks than an overstuffed sardine can? And perhaps just as important, is this school of sunken stories hiding some buried treasure? Are they worth diving into 35 years later? Well, why don't you come down and see for yourself? Wait, let's not end on that. So normally this is where a sponsor would go, if I had one. Instead, I have something else for you. As you can tell from the runtime of this video, I tend to get a little obsessed with subjects, and that was the case several years ago when I invented a pocket dexterity game called sand stacking. As I was editing a particularly long documentary, I began to get this image in my head, a visual metaphor for this massive project I was working on. It was of a sandcastle, slowly being built up using tweezers, placing 1 grain of sand at a time. I couldn't get the image out of my head, and eventually it morphed into this game idea I call sand stacking. It's an incredibly simple game and can be played with any number of players, but it's very difficult to master. Think of it like Jenga for surgeons, or good practice for bomb diffusers. If you like simple dexterity games, this is a nice one to be able to pull out of your pocket wherever you are. You can get them from my website, sandstacking.com. You can tell it's mine because it looks like it was made in 1997. If you're competitive at all, you can try your hand at setting a stacking record. You're never gonna guess who has all the records right now. If you're more on the meditative side, you should know that this game can also be used as a sort of contemplative focal point. The act of placing each individual cube requires slowed breathing and concentration, key elements to meditation. As you can see, I've got oodles and oodles of them right now, but these supplies are limited, so if you want one, go get one right now, because they won't be there forever. With all that said, enjoy the rest of the show. In 1971, a man named Frank Falachik was giving a lecture about something only he had ever done before. Vlachik was a bit of a daredevil. He had started a parachuting club outside his hometown and set an endurance record for flying an ultralight around a local lake for 10.5 hours non-stop. He was also one of 5 deep-sea divers to set a world record saturation dive of 80 hours at 1,000 feet deep, requiring him to decompress for nearly 2 weeks. But the lecture wasn't about any of that. It was about how he had breathed liquid, specifically an oxygenated fluorocarbon fluid. Frank lay on his back while he was intubated with the stuff, and he apparently didn't find the process overly uncomfortable, although he did develop pneumonia afterwards. So, please don't do this at home. Tide Potters, I'm looking at you. There was and still is a lot of potential in using oxygenated fluid for medical purposes, but Frank no doubt saw the possibilities in what it could bring to deep-sea diving. In the audience listening to him was a 17-year-old Canadian boy who was fascinated by the ocean, and this wild new technology immediately gave him an idea for a story about a group of scientists in a lab at the bottom of the ocean. That kid's name was Albert Einstein. I mean James Cameron. After dropping out of college, smoking a bunch of weed and dropping acid while working as a janitor and a truck driver, although not all at once, Cameron did what anyone would do after seeing Star Wars for the first time in 1977. He immediately quit his job and angrily entered the film industry. Cameron actually was pissed after he saw what George Lucas had done because up on screen was a film he had wanted to make. A film with incredibly inventive special effects that immersed you in another world like nothing else. This driving ambition for learning the trade and directing his own projects led him to raising $20,000 on his own from a local dentist so he could produce his first film, Xenogenesis. Its plot was interesting.
Raj, an engineered man trained to deliver humanity from the final cataclysm, and Laurie, a woman raised by a machine, but she alone knew the power of love, are sent in a gigantic sentient starship to search space for a place to start a new life cycle. Having come across a derelict starship belonging to an unknown people said to have been dead for 50,000 years.
Until grave-robbing space mushrooms, you know the rest.
The film is actually pretty good considering Cameron shot most of it in his living room and he was learning as he went. But the dentist was apparently not impressed, and he pulled the plug after seeing a screener. Thankfully, one person who saw it was impressed. One Roger Corman. Corman was an insanely prolific, independent filmmaking legend who had been working since the 50s. He'd given Jack Nicholson and William Shatner their first on-screen breaks, as well as many other actors and directors. Among the over 400 films he produced or directed, a pretty large number of them are ironically enough undersea or ocean-related, including his first one, Monster from the Ocean Floor.
Quick, head for the boat!
Sharks?
No, a giant octopus!
Must go faster.
Oh, also his second film was, I shit you not, The Fast and the Furious. This franchise apparently just celebrated its 70th birthday.
There's always room for family.
Roger Corman gave Cameron a chance to hone his skills as a special effects guru on films like Battle Beyond the Stars, but Cameron wouldn't get the chance to really direct a film of his own until a little B-movie starring an Austrian bodybuilder who could barely speak English. It did okay.
I'll be back.
After Cameron followed up The Terminator with the insanely successful Aliens, he finally had enough cachet in the industry to make the film he'd wanted to make since he was 17. A film he had always titled The Abyss. The Abyss is an incredible movie. Out of all the 89 Undersea films, The Abyss can actually make the journey from the late 80s to the modern day and not seem really dated. This isn't so for any of the other films, so enjoy all the positive things I'm about to say. I think the main reason for the film's durability is that Cameron actually went out and put his giant undersea lab under the sea. Or at least in an abandoned nuclear cooling station in North Carolina. But still, this thing had to actually maintain 1 atmosphere of pressure. It had to actually work underwater. In addition, his actors had to learn to be real scuba divers and to do pretty much all their own stunts. These people holding their breath pretending to drown, yeah, they're theater kids. But for the cast and crew, by all accounts, it was one of the worst film shoots of all time. Both James Cameron and Ed Harris nearly drowned in separate incidents. The chlorinated water bleached and burned everyone's skin and hair as they shot for hours underwater, and the dedication to realism was taken to absurd levels. This dead guy right here with the crab coming out of his mouth? Yeah, that's James Cameron's brother Mike holding his breath under 25 feet of water, letting a real crab crawl out of his mouth. Take after take after take. No shit, my guy. And this? Remember that fluid Frank Falachik breathed? This is the actual stuff. Don't worry though, apparently the rat, like Falachik, thought this was no sweat. The end result of all of this incredibly dedicated work is a film unlike any other. And that brings us to the first theory for why 1989 did what it did. 1989 sister film theory number 1. The conventional wisdom I've gathered from a lot of relatively recent articles written about 1989 is that at the time, upon hearing that wunderkind sci-fi director James Cameron was going to make an aliens underwater movie, all of Hollywood decided that they could get in on the action by making their own versions. Because clearly, this Abyss movie is going to be a success, so why not try to be on the ground floor of this hype for watery horror flicks? We'll see just how true this theory actually is, but if it is even a little true, it's fittingly ironic that in Cameron's film, spoilers, there's no vicious aliens. The Abyss is more like Close Encounters of the Third Kind underwater rather than aliens underwater. Less Zerg, more Protoss, if you get my drift. Out of all these movies, most people have probably seen or at least heard about the Abyss, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the story, but I can't really talk about some of the other films without at least touching on the main plot points. So, here we go. At the beginning of the movie, we're following a US nuclear submarine that's tracking an alien underwater craft that's going super duper fast.
130 knots, sir.
Nothing goes 130.
It eventually zooms right by the sub, causing it to lose power and smash into a cliff, killing everyone on board. This opening was always a little bizarre to me, considering how this film ends. At the end of the extended version of this movie, the aliens chastise us for being warmongering dickheads who kill each other and threaten to wipe us out with a massive tsunami, which, like, okay, fair. But you guys just killed hundreds of people for no reason. You had to have known that buzzing a submarine at 120 knots with your electronics interfering craft was gonna potentially destroy the sub. Like, why did you do that? And even if you somehow didn't know that was gonna happen, it's at least incredibly negligent. You need to get your shit together before you start coming at us, that's all I'm saying. So anyway, the US military doesn't know what happened, but needs to find and retrieve the nukes and any survivors, so they enlist the Deep Core mining rig to take them down, an undersea mining platform staffed by a bunch of blue-collar workers run by Ed Harris as Bud. Oh hey look, it's Bob Kelso.
Bob Kelso, how you doing?
Of course, along with the cadre of Navy SEALs comes Mary Mastrantonio as Lindsay, Bud's estranged wife who designed the Deep Core platform and, quote, had a lot riding on this.
Okay, Virgil, you wiener!
Wiener. While they're getting used to the pressure, Lindsay warns Lieutenant Coffey and his Navy SEAL buddies about high-pressure nervous syndrome, aka Chekhov's gun disease. But don't worry, guys. They're Navy SEALs. They've got this under control. Whoa, no! I love this part where Bud gets fed up with Lindsay's shit and tosses his wedding ring down the toilet, but then like 2 seconds later he comes back and is all, well, fuck, I guess it's blue hands now. And he literally has a blue hand for the rest of the movie. That shit stains. Shit stains. Anyway, over the course of the movie, Lieutenant Coffey progresses from the shifty-eyed stage of ocean madness to the emo, cutting yourself listening to sad music stage, and finally the all-too-familiar imploding submarine phase. Another satisfied Ocean Gate tourist. By the way, this guy has my favorite death in the movie. Oh no, how could I possibly swim around this 10-foot submersible? Blah, 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 blah. I love that at one point, Bud and his friend decide to swim without suits to another part of the rig to catch Lieutenant Coffey by surprise. Because the real surprise would be their facial expressions after jumping into water pressure at 900 psi. That's 16 in number of elephants standing on your face. But whatever, This gets a pass. It's a movie. At some point, even Cameron has to say, fuck it for the fun factor. Before he implodes, Lieutenant Coffee manages to rig up a nuke on a timer to explode the aliens at the bottom of the abyss, so Bud goes down to disarm it. Down, down, down. I'm sorry, but in this really emotional moment where Bud is literally plunging into the abyss, I just get Homer Simpson flashbacks. After he defuses the bomb, Bud waits for his inevitable death, but gets rescued by the manta ray-like neon synthwave aliens. At the end, in the version I watched, the theatrical version, the aliens show Bud his message of love he sent to Lindsay when he thought he was done for, and they clearly dig that. They're now cool with us, and they come up to the surface to say hi to everyone, apologize for murdering those sailors, and I assume we all live in peace forever. But like I said earlier, in the extended version, the aliens summon a massive wave and threaten all of humanity with annihilation, until they see Bud's message of love, which redeems us all, I guess. I know a lot of people like this extended version better, and I do agree it is thematically in tune with the rest of the film, but I really don't think you need it. It's comparatively ham-fisted with its message, and we've already absorbed the same thing through subtext. We've been watching the movie, okay? We know what the themes are. Let's just play it cool. Play it cool. Also, maybe this is just me, but adding in these extra scenes of people on shore is really immersion breaking for some reason. The whole movie thus far has only taken place on or in the ocean, and suddenly seeing the shore with random people being normal at the end just takes me out of it. Maybe it's everyone's 80s clothes, but overall it really dates it in a way nothing else does. The film is asking a lot of our attention anyway with its runtime and multiple potential climaxes, so trying to top everything again with a 1,000-foot wall of water just seems like too much to me. And that's it. The Abyss is great. The technical filmmaking is vintage Cameron. The acting is top-notch. The characters are pitch perfect, and the story, if somewhat hokey and drawn out near the end, holds together well enough to make this a classic all-time film. Show this to almost anyone from now till the end of time, and they will be entranced, because when you do something for real, it always looks amazing. It's actually a bit depressing watching The Abyss, like seeing humanity get to the moon in the 60s and just never going back, never pursuing this new toehold. Cameron forged new underwater filmmaking techniques that have barely been used since this film. And I'm not entirely sure why. It's not like The Abyss broke the bank. Adjusted for inflation, it cost $178 million to make, which sounds like a lot first, but it's actually on the low end for a major blockbuster these days. Of course, when you take into account how everyone on the set was miserable the whole time and how many people nearly drowned, I suppose you can see why faking it probably makes everyone happier, but it doesn't make for a better movie. And speaking of worse movies, if our exploit the abyss hype theory is correct, then the movie that best exemplifies an asylum-style mockbuster for it is probably the film that released just the month before, The Evil Below. According to Wikipedia, not only did this film not have a budget, but it came out on July 0th. Both good signs. The studio that produced it at least looks legit based on their movie posters. We've got Peacemaker, Mortal Passions, Headhunter, The Return of Family Man, and who could forget everyone's favorite, White Ghost. So, how does The Evil Below stack up?
Mermaids are very hot.
Yeah, everybody wants to fuck a fish.
This film is fucking bad.
The reef's back there.
We aren't going to the reef. You can see the tip of your nose.
I should say up front that I could only find this in 240p online, and I was not about to spend the $30 for the DVD. I'm sorry, apologies for the shit quality, but trust me, more resolution would not save this film. When I say this movie is bad, I think I should specify, because there are lots of different kinds of bad when it comes to movies. There are the films made by amateurs that can barely be called films, like, who is this guy?
Give me immediate body retrieval, now!
Terrible acting. I don't believe for a second he's actually a starship captain.
Bad.
There's bad movies that are made by non-filmmakers that end up actually being quite fun to watch, like a Neil Breen or Tommy Wiseau film.
I did not hit her. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not hit her. I did not. Oh, hi, Mark.
They may be terrible, but they fail earnestly and in such a unique way that you can't help but get caught up in them and marvel at how they even got made.
The force shield will cause death if an intruder gets too close.
Good bad.
There are the big-budget monstrosities that use every cliché and fail at basic storytelling, but wash over you with their massive production values like a tidal wave of numbing agent.
Beginning, middle, end. Facts, details, condense, plot.
A lot of the Transformers movies are this kind of bad.
It feels good to grab your flesh. Good looking bad.
And finally, there's the Evil Below kind of bad. A movie made by people who clearly know how to make a movie on a low budget, but play everything so safe and so predictable that you barely feel like you're doing anything by watching it. The film just sort of exists in the way that a vacuum exists. There's something in there that we have a name for, but there's nothing in there. And like a vacuum, it sucks the life out of anything exposed to it. I knew going in that this movie was going to be a low-budget crap fest, but I was hoping there would be enough heart in it to maybe qualify for Terabad status, but there's just not enough of that. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely some chuckle-worthy low-budget shenanigans, like the constant stings added to moments that don't call for them.
Father Dassar believed he was the watcher, the sentinel on that ship, and always has been.
What? Listen, did you ever,
Yes, I did.
What?
There's got to be a rational explanation.
Musical transitions that end when someone presses stop on the Casio keyboard. And a few unintentionally hilarious edits.
Hey, Max!
Dear God, Jesus, Max, no!
Overall, though, you get the sense that you're watching an episode of something made for daytime television, but the kind of show that doesn't occupy enough of your thought, so the existential dread starts seeping in and you start to feel every second tick away, and you realize there's a throbbing, deeply terrifying cynicism behind this paint-by-numbers production that perhaps captures our hopeless human condition better than even James Cameron's ragingly symbolic Abyss. Which is a shame, because if you just describe this story to me, I could see it actually being quite fun. In short, it's a story of this Englishwoman named Sarah Livingston on a hunt for the El Diablo, a sunken treasure boat from the 1600s. She hires this down-on-his-luck boat captain named Max, who is mildly interested in being in the film, to be her guide and help her find the treasure. I'm not kidding about his disinterest. She hires him, and at various points he's just like, "What do you want from me? Do we have to go out on the water?"
You're dead set on killing yourself. Why don't you do it on somebody else's boat?
Yes, well, we both know the answer to that one. Maybe we could sort of take a little afternoon pleasure cruise. If the water's clear around the reef.
No way, sandwich time. They slowly piece together the story of what happened to the El Diablo, and in the process find out that it's cursed and guarded by Lucifer, played convincingly by this guy.
Curiosity did kill the cat. Right?
Naturally, the island's criminal element, embodied in a slightly pickled Ewan McGregor stunt double, wants a piece of this underwater action, and plays foil to our dynamic duo with some underwhelming henchmen at his side.
Come on, Max, lay off!
Ultimately, they find the El Diablo and rig it with explosives to destroy the wreck and the curse with it, only to have Obi-Wan stop them so he can go down and grab some goodies for himself. They leave as the countdown nears 0, and our Jedi hero is killed in the blast when the devil keeps him from swimming away. No notes. On the shore, they're happy to have their lives, each other, and one piece of treasure. Apparently, the Cross of Coronado.
That cross is an important artifact. It belongs in a museum.
Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, earlier they defeat the devil by gunning a motorboat, causing him to fall overboard. See, again, sounds like it could be a Terabad contender just from that scene, but it's really not. It's not fun bad. It's bad in a way that makes you hate yourself. And I generally like myself. To be honest, I really should have guessed this movie would be cursed when I hit what I can only describe as a Denethor moment.
Existentially bad.
Next up is a movie that came out a little over a month before The Evil Below. A movie that at first glance seems to confirm our working theory that all the fish flicks in 1989 were Cameron copycats. In fact, of all the other 89ers, this film is most definitely the closest to The Abyss in terms of storyline. It's a film called Lords of the Deep. The film takes place in the mysterious, far-off year of 2020, after some of humanity has moved to a colony under the sea to escape a novel new disease called social media. One woman scientist in the colony makes contact with underwater aliens who she wants to study and connect with, while the base commander believes them to be hostile. He steadily grows more insane as he kills other members of the colony to keep them in the dark, until eventually he dies when the base implodes. The woman scientist and her friends all survive and live in peace with the altruistic aliens who, although from another planet, are weirdly manta ray shaped. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, if you guessed that there might be more to this than meets the eye, you'd be right, because the producer of this film was none other than legendary independent filmmaker Roger Corman. That's right, the same man who gave Cameron his start in film evidently was so shameless that he took his budding young protege's idea and made a knockoff version of it. What a bitch. Or was he? Because although all of that is true, it ignores the fact that Lords of the Deep was actually announced in a slate of new movies to be produced by Roger Corman's company in early 1982. That was the same year that young James Cameron was working for Roger Corman, shooting a film called Piranha 2, The Spawning. I do not recommend that film.
It can strike anywhere.
So, what am I suggesting? That in actual fact, Cameron copied Corman? I know it sounds crazy. Until you consider Cameron's filmmaking record. He was sued by writer Harlan Ellison shortly after the release of The Terminator, with Harlan alleging that Cameron had ripped off an episode of his from the 1960s series The Outer Limits called Soldier. They settled out of court in 1986, with Ellison receiving a credit in The Terminator and an undisclosed sum. For his Aliens script, Cameron recycled a lot of the beats from Dan O'Bannon and Ronald Shussett's original Alien script. People watching the away team through video monitors as they explore an alien hive. The android with ulterior motives, although twist, this time the android is a good guy. Everyone dying one by one until it's just Ripley left and she has to save someone she loves with a flamethrower in hand. The ship and/or facility blows up in a massive blast, and just when you think all is safe, the alien shows up for one final showdown until ultimately it is blown out of an airlock. T2's plot is just the Terminator, except with a liquid robot bad guy and Edward Furlong. Oh, and twist, this time the android is a good guy. And Avatar, do I really have to say it? But wait a second. Didn't I mention earlier that Cameron came up with the idea for The Abyss way back when he was 17? Well, kinda. You see, even by Cameron's own admission, his story had varied wildly through the decades. Originally, it was supposed to be about scientists in an underwater research lab, not blue-collar oil drillers. In one interview, he basically said the original idea, written on some scraps of paper, is long gone. So he likely didn't have a specific story in mind until he started to seriously consider the idea again in 1986, 4 years after Lords of the Deep was written for Roger Corman. So, is Cameron secretly a hack? Maybe. Look, this is all pretty speculative, and you could just as easily argue the opposite. Harlan Ellison sued lots of people. Some would argue quite frivolously. The original script for Lords of the Deep was written by Howard Cohen, but it was rewritten in 1988 by Daryl Haney, so it's tough to say if the original 1982 version is exactly what's on screen. And Roger Corman, well, he was never above pumping out mockbusters of his own to suckle from the Jurassic-sized teat of other bigger-budget productions. My point is that the evidence for the theory that all these undersea productions were hopping on the Cameron hype train is just as robust as the evidence that Cameron ripped off Corman's Lords of the Deep, which is to say, it's circumstantial, at least with what we've seen so far. So, let's dive a little deeper before we decide either way. We'll slot this as theory number 2, the everyone was actually ripping off Roger Corman because Cameron is a hack theory. So assuming, for the sake of argument, that The Abyss is a ripoff of the original work of Lords of the Deep, how does Lords of the Deep stack up as a film?
Sometimes I think you're programmed for everything but speed, Trilby.
I am trained for speed too, Commander Dobler.
I think you can tell it's kind of bad. But it's kind of good bad. Kinda. This film tells you right away from the opening shots that it is a bit of a mess. The miniature shots are actually not that bad generally, which is not surprising considering they were done by Robert and Dennis Skotak, the guys who did the miniatures in Aliens. But the sets are hilarious. No underwater base is complete without IKEA shades on your sliding doors. Like, if you showed me this screenshot and told me it was from a porno parody of The Abyss, I would nod. And then I'd ask you which one, because there's so many. The practical effects are 50s grade camp.
Oh my god.
The audio is a disaster.
Could be crew, Trilby. No, the crew is elsewhere. Well, all right.
And the acting is bad in so many different ways that I found myself excited for the next scene just to see in what specific way it would crash and burn.
What the hell is it? I can't get a reading on it.
Our hero in this story is Claire, a scientist at Martel Corporation's undersea lab who has recently discovered some mysterious sea goo that causes you to trip hard when you touch it. Claire is hilarious. For starters, some of her expressions are what I can only describe as enthusiastically ambiguous. I think this film would have been a lot better if it had been explicitly a comedy, because this woman has genuine Jennifer Coolidge energy.
Where?
The station is plagued by underwater earthquakes, and after one knocks out the power, this guy goes out to fix the problem, only to return as a blob of that same goo. And when Claire once again gets touched by the goo and flashes on another clown colonoscopy while hearing weird voices, she just acts fine, mentions it to no one. And this keeps happening over and over and over, and never once does she question her own sanity or seem bothered by it at all. It's just like, yep, script said it was aliens. How are you doing today?
It reassembled itself outside water.
So anyway, they put the blob of goo in a tank that looks like it's from the set of Eureka's Castle, and slowly it starts to transform into this stunning piece of special papier-mâché effects. Naturally, Base Commander Will Ferrell decides that he has to start individually suffocating his own crew to keep them from... Actually, I was never really clear on this bit. It turns out later on that he has orders to attack any aliens if he sees them, but like, they're not a military base or anything. Why is that his directive? And why does he have to kill his crew to do this? To keep them from making contact with the aliens? Why? My only guess is that he came down with the same deep down crazies that did in Lieutenant Coffee.
Look, are you coming with me or not?
I'll come with you.
That's what she said.
This movie is such a complete dumpster fire that it really should have been fodder for Mystery Science Theater.
Mr. Samox.
Excuse me. Yes, Trilby.
This film actually was on 2018's version of Mystery Science Theater 3000.
It was.
not too much.
Anyway, Will Ferrell keeps killing crew members as Claire goes to meet the aliens.
Okay.
And we get an actual legitimately awesome shot. Followed by some more wonderful acting.
They want to teach us balance.
We need that balance to save ourselves.
Yes.
Wait, where do I know this guy from?
It's the class of Coronado.
Oh shit! Eventually, Claire and her mustachioed boy toy get wise to their commander's suffocation fetish and try to leave, only to dramatically suffer the same fate. Until they're saved by their new papier-mâché friend. In the climactic finale, Claire and Mustache battle Will Ferrell and were treated to the quietest fight sequence ever put to film. In the end, the base implodes in a massive underwater earthquake, and our heroes escape to meet up with all their friends who were actually saved by the aliens.
You were right all along.
No, they were.
Lords of the Deep is genuinely a bad movie in so many ways, but I do think it just barely makes it to the good-bad side of things. I mean, they wear hotel name tags and the most 80s onesies ever conceived. That's just terrible. Personally, I have high standards for my good-bad movies. When I first saw Neil Breen's Double Down, I had no idea how to even process what I was watching.
Closing down a bank, fixing an election. It's all easy.
You're a genius. The best. But you know that.
It was hysterical and outrageous, and made me re-examine what I thought filmmaking even was.
I've been awarded every medal. The Medal of Honor. The Medal for Meritorious Service.
Seriously, I was obsessed with this stupid movie. During the pandemic, when everyone else was making sourdough bread, I made a parody of Double Down. I have every medal that you could possibly be awarded. Some were even invented just for me. I think good bad movies should give you something new to chew on, just like actual good movies do. Lords of the Deep doesn't do that. It doesn't deserve to be up there with Double Down or The Room, but it certainly deserves to be on Mystery Science Theater 3000. And it definitely deserves to be watched with friends while inebriated. It's a standard issue crapfest. And frankly, that's pretty good in my bad book. Holy fucking shit, is that the dolly track the model is attached to? Jesus Christ, this movie's bad. Before we go into the next two films, I think it's worth considering what people were actually saying at the time this phenomenon was unfolding. I don't doubt that these recent articles on the matter were well researched and thought out, but unfortunately they don't list any sources for their assertion that The Abyss was the reason for these other films getting made. I have a feeling that sometimes the benefit of hindsight can also be a limitation. What appears like a straightforward and reasonable assumption to make from 2024 might actually be blinding you to other explanations. And so it is with this mysterious, deep and wet year. In the May 1989 issue of Cinema Fantastique, a well-respected magazine which reported on soon-to-be-released sci-fi, fantasy, and horror films, there appears an article titled, appropriately enough, Lords of the Deep. In it, the authors definitely lay blame for the 1989 phenomenon on a trendsetter known for sci-fi blockbusters, but not James Cameron. No, they blame the guy who wrote this book, Michael Crichton. In 1987, the year a lot of these films actually got greenlit for production, Crichton's book Sphere was the best-selling science fiction book in America. In it, Crichton weaves a tale about an alien spacecraft that's found at the bottom of the ocean and the harrowing experience of several scientists interacting with a giant sphere. It's actually a really good book. Funny story, sometimes when I read a book, I like to cast actual actors as the characters. So when I read Sphere, I actually cast Dustin Hoffman as the lead in my head, and then wouldn't you know it, when the film came out, I know I don't deserve it, but I feel like I should get some kind of credit for that. The article even quotes Crichton, who hilariously enough was struggling at the time to get his books turned into movies. Some people have suggested that I ought to be taking a closer interest in this from a legal standpoint, said Crichton, but that's not my inclination. Stand-up guy, not a Harlan Ellison type. So, is this all Crichton's fault then? Is he the actual source for all this? Could be. The important thing is that this is closer to a primary source, a window into what was happening at the time. And if nothing else, it's worth noting that in none of the articles I searched in other trade magazines from the time did anyone credit The Abyss as the reason for the season. So I'm marking this theory number 3, the one sphere to unite them all. And now that I've said all that, let's take a look at a couple of films which were clearly copying from Alien. This is our main event prize fight. The reason I actually wanted to make this video in the first place. The two films which confused the hell out of me when I first saw them as a kid because they're so damn similar. In this corner we have DeepStar Six, released on January 13th on a budget of $8 million. DeepStar Six is directed by Sean S. Cunningham, producer and director of Friday the 13th. Fighting style, being the first 1989 undersea film released before anyone else, no matter what. Strengths, creating human drama with good characters on a small budget. Weaknesses, being so damn cheap he has actors bring clothes from home to stock his wardrobe. And in this corner we have Leviathan, released on March 17th on a budget of $21 million. Leviathan is directed by George P. Cosmatos, the Italian director behind Rambo First Blood Part 2. Fighting style, making the deepest out of any of the undersea films. Yes, seriously, the deepest. Strengths, excellent sets and great actors. Weaknesses, arguing non-stop with creature designer Stan Winston. Both films are gunning for the same thing, to be the best movie with the following plot that's totally not ripping off some other movie. An undersea facility becomes a slaughterhouse when its unsuspecting blue-collar crew unleash a creature which progressively kills each one of them until our breeding pair finally escape to the surface, only to be surprised that the creature came up with them. In a climactic showdown, the male lead saves the day and blows the creature sky high. The end. At this point, you might be flashing back on something I mentioned earlier, the Towering Inferno incident. Why couldn't these movies, so similar and clearly on a collision course with the same release window, not pull the same move, combine their resources, and reap the rewards together? Well, there's a couple reasons this doesn't happen like ever. Studios generally like to have their own brand identity, so collaborating with another studio can kind of encroach on that. In the same vein, collaboration means potential conflicts over creative control. But perhaps the biggest factor is that it's a bit of a prisoner's dilemma. Sure, you can choose to cooperate, but that means you have to split the revenues. Why not go head to head and see if you can't just outright be better than the other guy and take all the money? Studios are staffed by some competitive-ass people, and in this case, like in so many others, they went with may the best movie win instead. So, I'm taking all bets. Taking all bets. Get your best odds on my new underwater betting app, FishDuel, the only underwater app that lets you bet on 30-year-old movies. Out of the gate, DeepStar Six has the leg up on cover art. Both of these are awesome designs, but something about this half-eaten, alien-looking suit rising lifeless from the deep is just supremely terrifying. Especially if you've just convinced your parents that this film is totally fine for a third grader to watch. No. The last two films were made on shoestring budgets, so it was pretty easy to knock the effects and sets and acting and story and writing and editing and sound, but now we're getting back to respectable territory. The miniatures are mostly good, with special effects that don't look like they're from the 50s. We get some well-constructed shots, some nice dialogue that establishes character and motivation.
No, I don't have time to wait.
Yeah, but
You have your orders, right?
We even get some actually heart-pounding moments.
Kill a light.
The hands-down best character in the movie is Snyder, played by Miguel Ferrer, who was hot off of playing sniveling corporate weasel Bob Morton in 1987's RoboCop.
God, you girls are so great. I mean, I love to be with intelligent women.
But no one is actually a dud in this cast of mostly TV actors, least of all Studley leading man and actual Chad-faced Greg Evigan, who plays McBride, a submarine pilot from New Jersey.
You don't need some submarine pilot from New Jersey who's never had more than a week's pay in his pocket.
Because the only color allowed under the sea is apparently blue. And is a sub pilot really blue collar? That feels like it should be a different collar. It's not that surprising considering this film does read as a pretty blatant Alien ripoff at points, which was even admitted by one of its screenwriters, Louis Abernathy. You probably know him best from his acting role in Titanic.
Pretty cool, huh?
But Abernathy had originally written DeepStar Six with co-writer Geof Miller as a small-cast, low-budget vehicle for them to act in. Instead, under the singularly minded Sean Cunningham, the script was continuously rewritten as they were shooting. Cunningham was obsessed with being the first of the 89 undersea films to release, leaving little time for the story to find its voice, which is the reason I personally think it ends up grabbing a lot of plot points from both Alien films. We've got the blue-collar crew shooting the shit and griping over contracts.
Then after that, you'll fix the starter in DSRV-1.
Exactly, but I think after that,
Then after that, you report to me for another work assignment. I said it was Capelli's day off, not yours.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we ought to discuss the bonus situation.
Right.
Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right, baby?
Everyone referring to each other by their last names, which, by the way, they do in Leviathan, too.
Well, good morning to you too, Snyder.
How's it going, Collins?
I've ordered Hodges and Osborne to stop digging.
Parker, will you just listen to the man?
The motion tracking of the creature as it gets closer and closer.
Contact closing. 300 meters. 250. 200 meters.
6.
Can't be, that's inside the room.
It's reading right, man, look.
This entire fucking sequence.
It means heal the rupture here. And run a line from the medical lab. Patch it into the airlock pressure system.
And weld plate steel over these ducts here, and here, and here. That should seal off med lab and operations.
Outstanding.
The escape from the nuclear blast scene. And of course, the false ending with the creature punking the last survivors. The slightly tragic thing is that there is a lot here that's actually got its own thing going on, specifically with the characters. McBride and Collins' relationship is treated pretty well, with Collins subtly shown as being secretly pregnant with McBride's kid, unsure of what to do since she knows he's a fly-by-night kind of guy who probably won't stick around for her. McBride is best friends with Captain Laidlaw, whose main focus is his wife and kid. So when Laidlaw gets chopped in half and sacrifices himself to save them both, it makes sense that McBride comes to realize what's important in life and pulls the chattiest move ever by proposing to Collins mid-battle with a sea beast.
Will you marry me?
And in Snyder, the writers reimagined a classic nautical archetype in a really cool way. A character type I am a little surprised didn't make an appearance in any of the other ocean flicks, namely the Jonah. As portrayed in Master and Commander, the Jonah is someone who is cursed and will inevitably bring misfortune on the rest of the crew. Sailors are a historically very superstitious lot, so you can see why this kind of figure evolved. Snyder is the perfect modern vessel for this, an overworked guy who has spent way too long under the sea and just wants to get back to the surface as soon as he can. When things start going haywire, he can't help but make mistake after mistake, one compounding on the next, setting things in motion which lead to each crew member's demise. After one too many of these ridiculous fuck-ups, the rest of the surviving crew just stands there looking at him in disbelief like, "What is wrong with you, bro?" And you sympathize with him as this guy who just can't stop fucking up. Although one of his screw-ups is nuclear-grade, inexcusably stupid. But we'll get to that. The story starts when a couple of the DeepStar Six workers accidentally blast a huge cavern open while clearing an area for construction, unleashing an ancient, bloodthirsty arthropod of gigantic proportions. By the way, it's customary on monster movie sets for the crew to give nicknames to the monster. On Alien, for example, they called this guy the Big Chap. This pretty thing was nicknamed Betty. It immediately starts attacking anything that has a light on it, killing the two workers in their sub, and then attacking and disabling a nearby outpost with Collins and a researcher named Burciaga stuck inside. Well, just Collins stuck inside. McBride and Captain Laidlaw rescue Collins, but not before Laidlaw gets the old divided by two and forces his friends to swim for safety. I have to say, I love this moment after McBride and Collins escape. They're both all soaked and cold, and McBride gives her his sopping wet sweater to warm her up. "My friend, I'm sure she appreciates the sentiment, but your job is literally in the water. I feel like you should know that's not gonna work." Afterwards, we get a Marvel shirtless scene, and then Collins reveals she's pregnant.
What do you say if it's a boy, we name it after the captain?
And then, the Jonah strikes. Before they can evacuate DeepStar 6, Van Gelder asks Snyder to secure the nuclear missiles. A generally good thing to do if you got them.
Fine. Are you familiar with the procedure, or do you want me to assist you?
I think I can handle it.
No. Naturally, Snyder follows the prompts in the most brain-dead way possible, ignoring the menu which clearly states missile detonation. And he detonates the missiles.
Yes.
The shockwave causes the base to erupt in a chorus of technobabble and background action straight out of a high school play.
Overlap.
Okay, FLP fraction.
We got 17.
Reroute the load unit.
Where?
System C!
Apparently, Abernathy made up a lot of nonsense words in the script as placeholders for actual things he planned to come up with later. Throwaway words like Framus and Flemmage. But the production process was so sped up that Cunningham ended up having the actors just use the nonsense terms. The threat of another nuclear explosion due to a coolant leak in the base forces the crew to send out McCoy in a gym suit, an actual real-life deep-sea diving suit, to help patch it up. And wouldn't you know it, Betty's got a problem with Jim. When they try to escape through a locked door, Snyder stands there being a Jonah frozen with fear until Norris lets them out.
What are you doing? Come on,
After another plot contrivance forces them back into the room to patch something else, Betty rears her head again, and in the confusion, Snyder accidentally stabs and blows a hole in Van Gelder with a pressurized shark dart. At this point, the stress of his own stupidity is too much even for Snyder, and after getting forcibly sedated, he flips out and hops in the only escape pod, rocketing off to the surface without having decompressed, leading Norris to deliver a pitch-perfect line.
I'm gonna kill that son of a bitch, Snyder.
He's already dead.
In the original script, Snyder's head was going to explode due to the pressure, but having him bleed out from every orifice worked just as well, disturbing the shit out of me when I was 9 years old. As the last three alive, Collins and Norris wait patiently while McBride swims off to grab the last sub on the rig. In her most desperate moment, Collins decides to pray. She quietly asks God to protect her, her baby, and McBride. While Norris sits right next to her, wondering what shit she did to get left out of the prayer. And apparently God was listening. Betty comes spilling into the room, roaring like an arthropod does, and kills Norris while getting electrocuted itself, allowing Collins to escape into the decompression chamber with McBride. Our heroes barely escape the nuclear blast and enjoy letting their guard down just long enough to set up Betty's jump scare. McBride grabs a flare gun and sets off the leaking fuel, killing the creature, but also himself. Hey, Collins. You a little cold there? Here, take my sweater. Oh, what?
McBride!
And they lived happily ever after for 3 more days. DeepStar 6 is a roller coaster, but it's not taking any new twists or turns you haven't seen elsewhere done far better. The characters give you some more track, but to be honest, it's just not enough. I would have loved for this to have taken a little more time in the oven to create a more original story for the characters to inhabit. The final product feels like we've got some interesting people stuck on a rail for the alien experience at your local county fair. If Cunningham had been just a little less obsessed with being first, I think this could have actually been a standout film for the year. As it is, the combined effect of some cool elements with some meh elements is a viewing experience that leaves you sort of adrift. Like when it's all over, you kind of want to watch a more well-rounded film to get the taste out of your mouth. It's a movie! Now, can Leviathan be that more well-rounded film and clear that mediocre bar to be the champ in the head-to-head? Again, taking all bets, please, seriously, I've only got one other user on FishTool and he's just betting on how many RoboCop alumni are going to be in these movies. I'm betting 2, because leading the pack in this next creature feature is RoboCop himself, Peter Weller. Italian director George P. Cosmatos had actually worked with Peter Weller before in his 1983 film Of Unknown Origin, a film about one man's increasingly insane battle with a rat. The film apparently got rave reviews at the time, so I guess you just had to be there. Despite the fact that Leviathan weirdly opens with almost the exact same credit sequence as DeepStar, you can pretty quickly tell there's a difference when you hit the sets. The extra millions of dollars are very obvious in every shot. Where DeepStar has Star Trek-style button panels that hope you don't look too closely, Leviathan has functional, plausible-looking equipment that looks like you could walk up and start using it. DeepStar has just enough of a veneer over their plywood sets to give you the illusion of a watery base, but Leviathan spreads out a complete underwater facility with identifiable, livable sections and a lavish undersea exterior. Hell, even the quality of the images is better, with DeepStar being shot on standard 35mm film stock, like most lower-budget films at the time, and Leviathan being shot with an anamorphic lens on 35mm Eastman 5293, a stock known for finer film grain and better color reproduction, according to sources. I don't actually know anything about film. Don't clip that. Leviathan is clearly punching in a higher weight class, and not just on the production side. The story was written by David Peoples and Jeb Stewart, the writers behind Blade Runner and Die Hard, respectively. So even if it is cribbing a bit from Alien, this thing has real creative heft behind it. No reason it can't rise to the occasion then, right? Well, it certainly starts out on the right foot. We begin by following our blue-collar crew while mining 16,000 feet down, a depth that director Cosmatos apparently thought would help differentiate his film from all the others. I mentioned that tidbit earlier, but I'm not kidding. He brought it up multiple times in different interviews as a big selling point. Although, I guess he increased the depth at some point because 12,000 feet just wasn't deep enough. They've made the movies in the space, but nobody has ever made a movie so deep down in the water. We're the first. That's what fascinated me. Not even 20,000 leagues under the sea is this deep. They've never made this kind of movie before. But like, it's a movie, George. It's make-believe. I could come along and make a movie that goes 1 foot deeper, and now I have the title for deepest movie. Captain, we're at 16,000 feet. What are your orders? Keep going. Of course, no one can beat the actual world record holder for deepest movie of all time, The Core. I mean, obviously, it's The Core. Pretty sure you can't go deeper than the middle. In any case, our undersea miners are being all blue-collary with snide remarks to each other, and even Ernie Hudson singing 16 tons.
You call me 'cause I can't go. I owe my soul to somebody's soul.
And I gotta say, these underwater shots are so well crafted they deserve a quick breakdown. This is not underwater. It looks underwater, but it's not. It's a dry set bathed in blue light. These floating bits of detritus are actually bits of ash created by candalotti, slow-burning candles wrapped in paper and solid alcohol that give off fine white embers. To simulate the slowed motion of walking under the water, they shot at a higher frame rate of 48 frames per second, and then slowed it down to 24 in post, making everything seem slowed. And finally, to really bring home the illusion, they inserted tiny bellows into the boots of the suits so that each footstep would cause a puff of dirt to float up, emulating a silty seabed. I obviously really appreciate Cameron's commitment to realism in the abyss, but I can't deny I have a special place in my heart for this kind of practical effects work. It's like a little magic trick, combining lots of tiny things together to produce a really convincing image that's greater than the sum of its parts. Of course, since they shot it at 48 frames per second and then slowed it in post, they couldn't exactly do their lines during these underwater takes, which is a bit noticeable once you know that.
I'm going down after him.
Roger that, Big Willie.
While making their way back to the facility, the suit belonging to De Jesus begins to malfunction, causing him to panic and lose air.
Open the damn door.
RoboCop, aka Beck, tries to calm him from the facility, frantically looking for their doctor, who is AWOL. Eventually, they get aboard and De Jesus comes too. In the aftermath, we get to see where the fault lines of this facility lie. The workers who go out and drill are skeptical of their new boss, Beck, who, as it turns out, is just a geologist, not a shack boss, as Ernie Hudson puts it.
Doc should have been there.
If he was a real shack boss, Doc would have been there.
They're also disdainful of the doc, an aloof man who doesn't seem to take his responsibilities seriously.
Are you gonna come to work tomorrow, Doc?
Well, I'll be on the golf course in the morning. And if I don't have any babies to deliver, I could stop by after lunch.
In a deft maneuver he doubtlessly learned from reading the 30-Minute Manager, Beck dresses down the doc for not being on duty during the shift, winning points with the crew.
Section 1412 of the Tri-Oceanic Manual requires a mining shack's medical officer to be present in the control room.
Woo, you just got schooled, son!
This is where the core romance of the film, that between Ernie and Beck, truly begins. A romance that will no doubt blossom in the face of the daunting challenges to come. The closest thing to DeepStar's Jonah in this film is the wet bandit himself, Daniel Stern. Although he doesn't accidentally cause a nuclear detonation, he does find a treasure chest from a nearby sunken Russian ship containing vodka that secretly causes severe Cronenbergism.
Oh, that's disgusting.
In English, the ship is called Leviathan. Fun fact, they considered changing the name of the movie because apparently most Americans didn't know what that word meant. It's a good thing we've only gotten smarter since then. Six-Pack, which is Daniel Stern's name in this film, secretly absconds with some of the tasty underwater vodka after Beck confiscates all the booty and puts it under lock and key. He and soon-to-be-dead lady enjoy some nips together later that night, dooming them to becoming horrifically mutated fish monsters. Which, frankly, I'm okay with. This lady doesn't deserve it, but holy shit, Six-Pack might be the most infuriating character in any of these movies. Maybe any movie. He is so over-the-top misogynistic, dickish, and weirdly grabby that I'm convinced any real crew would have fired him from a torpedo tube after 20 minutes. These are all of his lines.
I was asking you if you're hooked on 22, you dumb shit. You trip on a tit or something, we're all waiting on you, honey.
No bigger than your dick.
Oh, bullshit! Oh, jeez! Will you pipe down?
Yeah, I bet you do. I bet you was imploding in your pants.
Could you, check my pockets? We do it now. Ooh, what a pair.
I think it's funny when you eat this goddamn thing.
Blow this. Hey, Willie, remind you anything?
Drinking brew and eating pussy.
Oh, Six-Pack.
This man is a menace. If that's not enough for you, watch how he wipes down a dry erase board. Ugh. Death penalty. After growing scales and then dying, the worst character ever then gets the best scene in the movie. Ernie, who, along with the rest of the crew, has been kept in the dark about this affliction by Beck and the doc, slowly enters to chit-chat with what he thinks is a resting Six-Pack. But of course, the audience knows he's dead. Until this moment.
Yeah, we just brought Bowman in, man. She'll look too good. You know what you got? Ain't catching.
This scene almost made me shit my pants when I first saw it. A perfect moment that only happens because we've been privy to knowledge that the character doesn't have. For Ernie, it's just Six-Pack being sick and rolling over, but for us, it's a dead body coming back to life.
Hey, look, I'm sorry, man. You're going back to sleep, okay?
That asymmetry of knowledge does so much work in building tension. It's genuinely amazing to me. Unfortunately, it's also the high point of the film, so get ready to just go down from here. We get a brief aside where Beck and Amanda Pays bond over their shared sense of distance from the crew.
Did you bust him because of me?
Maybe.
But as an audience, we're not fooled by the soft music. This is a diversion. These two clearly have no chemistry, and no one in their right mind would cast them together as love interests. I see you, movie. Besides, we know the real budding relationship has already been set in motion.
I see the crystal raindrops fall.
After discovering his mutated fish corpse, the soon-to-be dead girl decides she'd rather off herself than end up like Six-Pack, and I gotta say, she gives a pretty chilling performance as this poor doomed woman. But like I said, we're heading down, so I promise that's the last of the good stuff. Beck and the doc, for no apparent reason, decide not to tell the rest of the crew what actually happened, even after seeing Six-Pack and the girl semi-alive and fused together in a congealed seafood casserole.
What's What's going on?
Instead, they enlist the crew to help drag the bag containing their bodies to the airlock. De Jesus and Hector Elizondo notice there's something moving inside the bag and go to drop it, rightly thinking their friends are still alive inside. Just then, a claw lashes out and scratches Hector, unleashing the fused fishy ball of flesh from the bag. They hurriedly launch it into the depths, but not until a protruding limb gets severed and drops inside. Now, I could just be a moron, but I think this is where confusion starts to seep in. The doc theorizes to Beck that perhaps the vodka was spiked by the Russians as a genetic experiment to create an aquatic super soldier that can live deep under the sea.
Homo aquaticus, a man who could live underwater. Think of the possibilities.
And where did they dump the fishy monster? Oh, the sea! Oh, so that means it's clearly still alive and will play a role going forward, right, movie? No? That monster's gone, never to be heard from again. Oh, okay, cool, that's cool. But the severed leg part that's still inside the base, that lives. Are we totally sure these guys wrote Blade Runner and Die Hard? This is the first instance of a recurring problem in this film where certain bits of info either aren't accounted for or are just not explained well in film language. The main bit is just how this monster works. It's been compared to The Thing, and I can kind of see that with the body horror aspect, but The Thing worked narratively because there was also this mystery. Anyone could be The Thing. You didn't know. Anyone could be infected, so the paranoia was easy to generate and it drove the story. There's no such mystery here. We can guess pretty quickly that Hector is infected from the scratch and he'll eventually turn. Instead, we just get a steadily mutating Katamari Damacy, slowly adding infected crew members to its growing mass. And although that sounds scary, in actual fact it ends up looking kind of pathetic. It just looks like one of those failed genetic mashups of the Alien and Ripley and Alien Resurrection. In a form like that, the worst it should be able to do is drool on you while it pleads for death. Apparently, Stan Winston and his team came up with multiple different monster designs, but just couldn't settle on a single one for the film. So they ended up combining all of them into a single monster, which is a good way to make everyone feel included in a school project, but not really a good strategy for a monster design in a blockbuster film. In a monster film, you end up creating, well,
I always thought the monster, though, looked like a chicken to me.
Yeah, a big chicken. The nickname for this guy among the crew was Monster Stew at first, but Ernie's apt description of it as a giant chicken caught on instead. It just looks comical. How could this thing possibly threaten anyone? It can barely move. I think the worst thing you can say about a monster design in a horror film is that it's not scary. And this thing is hilariously unscary. But anyways, that's all coming up. It starts out as a severed foot, which gives birth to a weird leech that attacks De Jesus in the kitchen. When Ernie goes to get help, they come back and find that something escaped through the locked door. The team arm themselves with various tools you might expect to find under the sea. A chainsaw, a buzzsaw, a circle saw, hedge clippers, and a couple of massive flamethrowers.
All right.
Naturally. They figure out that it likes blood, so they collect some of their own to set a trap for the monster in the airlock. While they wait, Hector complains his wound itches, so the doc wants to go grab more bandages from the infirmary. And then we get this weird exchange.
Where are you going, Doc?
The infirmary. Without protection?
You shouldn't go out there.
She's right, you know.
All right. Then, instead of getting the bandages, the doc goes and sends a message to their corporate headquarters, warning them of the infection and of his intention to sabotage their escape pods to spare humanity, which he then does. Finally, it's time for Hector to turn, and we get a Thing-style mouth-hand going on. Hector takes down the doctor, and finally it's just Beck, Ernie, and Pays, and you can just feel the tension boiling just under the surface. Beck and Ernie wanting to tell each other how they feel, but knowing they can't in front of this conservative Christian woman who won't understand. It was still the 80s after all. Their love would have to wait. They go to the escape pods only to find the doctor's sabotage and final note. They also don't get any help from their corporate contact Martin, a woman with eyes so penetrating it's borderline inappropriate.
I realize you must have gone through hell.
Gone? Bitch, we still here!
She says they can't send a rescue yet because there's a hurricane above them.
I don't buy it.
Unsurprisingly, they discover she's lying for some corrupt reason when they see there's already a news report about their deaths. When the monster knocks out the air supply, our heroes go looking for the leak, and of course they split up. It's clearly an attempt by Ernie and Beck to ditch the girl, but it doesn't work. Pays escapes an attack by the monster, and the three of them desperately run as it nudges its way towards them. I swear, if they just grabbed a bunch of pipes and beat the shit out of it, there's nothing it could do. It's a shambling mess in the background of these shots. What are you afraid of? Someone judging you for how badly you'd kick its ass? They decide to escape in their undersea suits and end up partially crushing the creature in the airlock as they do. The station starts imploding and they rocket up towards the surface. Oh, FYI, the way decompression works in this movie is shut up, it's magic, don't worry about it. On the surface, Pays kisses Beck, which you can tell he hates, and they pretty quickly signal a chopper to pick them up. And then we get one of the more bizarrely edited bits of the film. We're in this sort of calm post-climax drifting with our heroes, and then... I'm sorry, we're in Jaws now. The sharks don't do much more than swim around, and then 25 seconds later, literally 25 seconds later, they're just gone. And the music is suddenly back to being all calm and triumphant. George, why? Were you just contractually obligated to have these sharks in the movie at some point? Did they know the producers? So anyway, the calm is then once again broken by, surprise, surprise, the fish monster, who has somehow survived being partly crushed and imploded. I guess ugly dies hard. I mean, look at that face. That is a face that dies hard. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Enhance. Enhance. This is a different monster. That's Six-Pack's face. And that's the girl! This is the monster they ejected from the base earlier. Holy shit. 30 years on and I'm just realizing that. Oh, fuck. I guess I owe an apology to the movie. You know what? No. Those faces pop up on screen for less than a second. Visually, it's the same creature as the other one. Why wouldn't you think they're the same? They even mention earlier that it has regenerative powers, so that smushing it in an airlock doesn't mean it's dead according to the movie's own logic.
Think of the possibilities. Regeneration. The ability to withstand extreme cold, pressure.
This is crazy to me. They had all these different monster designs that they wanted to use, and they ended up smushing them together. Why not make the monsters look different if they're two different ones? No, this is on the movie. Even the IMDb page doesn't specify that it's a different monster. George, look, I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed. 30 years later. At least we can look forward to our blossoming romance between Beck and Ernie, and oh, he's being drowned by the monster. Yeah, head's being held underwater. Someone to help? Throw something at the monster, maybe? Nah, and he's dead. Awesome. Great way to get rid of that character.
I hear the...
In all seriousness, I do think any other pairing would have been better than Weller and Pays. There is negative chemistry between those two. But anyways, Beck pulls out a grenade and gives us the worst one-liner in history as he chucks it into the creature's mouth.
Say, ah, motherfucker!
Supposedly he's saying, say ah, as in open your mouth. But I swear he says, say hi, motherfucker.
Say, ah, motherfucker!
Which I think is a far better capper to one of the sloppier films we've seen. Finally, to end the movie, Beck punches the corporate bad guy in the face, and we fade to credits. Leviathan, as you can see, is uneven. It's got some really great filmmaking aspects to it, but a story that is strangely shambolic, considering the writing talent behind the script. It's a mishmash of ideas and tropes from other movies that just end up in a confusing gumbo, which ironically is reflected in the design of its monster. Monsters! I still don't believe that was supposed to be two different monsters. Some of the blame may lie with the fact that George Cosmatos and creature designer Stan Winston apparently did not get along at all. Cosmatos eventually left Winston to direct all the sequences with the monster himself, so maybe that contributed to some of the strange choices? It does have its moments, but like Deep Star, its flaws leave you a little lost. Leviathan actually feels a little worse in that regard, thanks to the ending's spastic nature. So, who wins between these two mid-weight films? Who landed the most blows? Who got the knockout? The final tally, yes, I'm getting it now. It's Leviathan by a hair. To be frank, the only reason I'm going with Leviathan is Ernie Hudson's amazing one-liners.
A man could be 2 feet away and on fire and you wouldn't see him.
Okay, you don't know shit about skiing, man. They don't ski in Spanish Harlem.
I'll try to get some rest. Hey, I ain't gonna never be able to sleep again in life, ever. But this whole thing is unnecessary, Doc. The only skin problem I can see is white people. How come you wear those gloves?
I think this movie would be 5 times better if you just made Ernie Hudson the lead. And unlike RoboCop, Pays and Hudson actually do have some chemistry. Boy, we really got into the weeds with those two. I definitely have my complaints about them, but I gotta admit, I did enjoy myself. I mean, they're both varying degrees of Alien-inspired, so as a fan of the franchise who just wants more of that stuff, it's kind of like crack to me. Underwater crack, but crack nonetheless. I just wish we could have gotten more insight into what the creators were thinking. Why exactly did they create these films when they did? Was it inspired by The Abyss, or Sphere, or maybe something else? Oh well.
Mr. Samox?
Yes, Trilby.
You have a call coming in from an unknown number.
Oh, put it on the main screen. Hello, yes, who's calling?
My name is Jeff Miller, and I was one of the 2 writers on DeepStar Six.
Oh, wow, that's convenient. Do you mind answering a few questions about your movie?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Don't mind if I eat while we're talking.
Not at all. What are you eating?
Marshmallow fluff, sardines, and ketchup.
Jesus Christ, Jeff.
Yeah, pretty gross.
Well, anyway, how did Deep Star 6 even come about?
The film was originally called Claws, and it was supposed to be like a giant lobster kind of guy. The pitch was very simple. Aliens underwater. We sort of knew about the Abyss. We were definitely in a race to get first. If we had come out after the Abyss, we would have been perceived as just a knockoff, but because we came out before the Abyss, we were seen as a sort of our own idea.
So I gotta ask you, since you had front row seats for this phenomenon, why do you think this happened? Why do you think this particular year got so overstuffed with these films?
Ideas are built on the shoulders of other ideas, right? You know, Michael Crichton comes along and decides he's going to write Sphere for whatever reason. That his story, his idea wasn't created out of a vacuum. It was created in context of all the other cultural things that are going on at the time. And it was the same with us. Lewis was starting to get into scuba diving, which was, at the time, was becoming more popular. And he'd see like lobsters, various critters on the ground. And so he started to think about, what if one of these things got really big? Jaws had just come out. It's never one thing. It's always a constellation of things.
Oh, it's really well said, Jeff. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Oh, and okay, he's gone. Quick and to the point. I like that. Well, I guess we have to consider one final theory then. Is this all just a coincidence? I mean, sure, a lot of these films share similarities, but wouldn't you expect that to some extent? Stories are finite things. There's only so many ways to construct a monster kills crew one by one kind of script. Is it really that surprising then that 2 sci-fi horror films would borrow plot elements from the greatest sci-fi horror film ever made? Or that a fly-by-night production studio would release their mockbuster a month before the big budget movie they're hoping to milk attention from? Or that a producer, known for making low-budget independent films, would see an opportunity to throw his undersea project into production in time to capitalize on his protege's blockbuster? Could very well be that the success of Sphere or the anticipation of another James Cameron blockbuster was what set everything in motion. But I have this nagging suspicion that if you deleted both of those things from history, we still would have had a slate of undersea films come out just the same. Because like Jeff alluded to, sometimes it's just the right time for certain stories to be told. When your country is coming to grips with how close it actually got to nuclear annihilation. When the 50th anniversary of World War II's end means reliving the grittiness of that conflict's reality. When the world sees on a planetary scale the destruction of a comet impacting the surface of Jupiter. When a whole culture is coming to terms with its captivation by reality TV. Or even something as small as non-committal relationships being kinda in right now. And if you roll back the clock just 4 years before 1989, a man named Robert Ballard was taking pictures 12,000 feet below the ocean's surface from the porthole of a tiny submarine. The images he brought back from the legendary Titanic shipwreck set off a firestorm of interest that, in all honesty, has never really died down. With a slew of new underwater filmmaking techniques and technologies being pioneered by people like Al Giddings, this vast new world was opening up to human imagination in ways it never had before. And it wouldn't take a genius to see its cold, dark abyssal plains, alien-looking creatures and lethal pressures, and see outer space. This time, not as black emptiness, but as a deep blue curtain stretched out in all directions. We each like to think that we're one of a kind, original, that no one else could ever come up with our ideas, but it's just not true. The time makes the human, as much as the human makes the time, and 1989 was the time for underwater movies. Heck, originally, The Rift was written as a film set in outer space, but somewhere along the line it got changed. Oh my god, I forgot The Rift. Fuck! What is there to say about The Rift, aka Endless Descent? Is there anything to say about it? Well, judging by this Fangoria article from the time, I'd say everyone was pretty much done with this genre by 1990. The Abyss had planted a blockbuster flag on the summit the year before, and seeing another lower-budget undersea horror flick coming out clearly set something off in this writer. Seriously, I don't think I've ever seen a promo article so disdainful just because of a film's subject. And in that same spirit, I'm going to give this movie a quick and painful breakdown. Like I was saying, originally it was supposed to be set in outer space, but with the ocean as this new exciting canvas at the time, the producers decided to put it underwater. And it didn't make the movie one iota better. In short, it's another crapfest on the level of Lords of the Deep, although much less endearing in its failures. Our lead is this guy, who is supposedly a brilliant sub-designer, a premise that's undermined every time he opens his mouth.
So do we send the exploration pod?
No way. It would never survive the turbulence nor the temperature, Captain. That water's working at 537 Kelvin.
Pay a lot of money to come to the theater. They want to know what I'm doing.
Frankly, I think he was more convincing in this role.
I was working at a small firm in Orlando, and one day, bam, just like that, gator eats penis. Excuse me? Well, that was my first high-profile case. It was a classic Florida divorce.
Siren 1, his super advanced sub, got lost in the ocean, so the shady company who had him design it insists he join a NATO rescue mission aboard its sister ship, Siren 2. The boat is captained by Arlie Ermey, playing his one and only character, hard-ass military guy.
I would give you people at ease, but it appears that you've already beaten me to it.
The movie is one long cliche, much more so than any of the other films, which is saying something.
Hold on, folks.
60 feet.
I hope you like roller coasters.
Kill me!
Wick, man, I got a bad feeling about this.
Just take it easy, Skeets.
Our one black character is named Skeets. Show him what you got, Skeets.
Big!
Why don't we save ourselves a lot of trouble and kill that son of a bitch now? I'll get right on it. Just hold it right there.
Well, let's get to it, huh?
My man. My man!
And the technobabble runs rampant.
Tell Robbins to reverse the polarity of the ship's radar cloaking device.
That should allow the outside electrical field to shock it.
There's a lot in this movie that just does not make any sense. For some reason, Captain Ermey doesn't want our sub-designer to run a diagnostic before they get underway to make sure everything runs right, which, of course, then it doesn't and causes them to crash into an iceberg. Why? No one on board seems to really know how to run the sub. It's like a fever dream. Oh, and at one point, the sub makes an emergency landing. sub with landing gear. Oh yeah, I can see how this was supposed to be in space. I will say it does have a few fun retro sets and creature designs, but that's mostly it. The story runs through the same sci-fi horror thriller territory we've been playing in, but in a way that seems designed to avoid any contact with original ideas. We get a last-minute betrayal by company stooge Ray Wise near the end as he attempts to cover up mutant experiments, which of course he fails to do. Wait, Ray Wise, wasn't he in RoboCop 3? Well, congrats on your win, Bodlicker87, wherever you are. The film ends when, surprise, surprise, our hunky lead and his arm candy escape the depths as the last survivors, destined to pump out future warriors in the fight against communism. The Rift is the last fart bubble to break the surface on this trend, and future undersea projects in the years to come, no matter what they were, seem to meet the same fate: box office flops. None of these movies made their money back, except maybe The Abyss, but even that was considered a financial failure for Cameron, who only got his money-making mojo back with Terminator 2. It's kind of crazy to think about. An entire sub-genre that had millions poured into it never really seemed to get anyone's attention. Personally, although I might not think they're all great films, I'm glad they exist. When asked about the flood of competing projects, the most common response I saw from these directors was acknowledgement and even appreciation. No two movies are ever exactly the same, and with so many different voices, you're bound to find something you like about each one. Except for The Evil Below. Well, that about wraps it up. Just want to thank today's sponsor one more time, my game, Sand Stacking. The simplest, smallest, and hardest game you will ever play. Feel free to check out my website, sandstacking.com, for... What the hell? What's going on? There's something out there. It's attacking the base. The Flemage has a Quiznark blockage. Set the Franklin meter to 7, Trilby. God damn it. Prepare the magic decompressors.
Enjoyed that video, please consider becoming a patron. Links in the description. Your fingers aren't wet and freezing like mine, consider liking and subscribing. If you do, more videos get made. I think I left my phone in the base, so see you guys next time. Oh God! There's a third one! It's different if you look really close!
If you're still watching, thanks for making it all the way to the end. I've always wanted to try my hand at video essays, and this particular topic has been on my mind for a while, so I'm glad I finally got to make this. Obviously, in first attempts, mistakes get made, and I know I've made a few here. In my next one, I'm going to try to take care to avoid spoilers when possible, something I didn't try to do at all this time. Special thanks to Geof Miller for taking the time to talk with me about DeepStar Six. Also, shoutouts to Daryl, aka Duke Haney, writer of Lords of the Deep, who also talked with me at length, but whose interview got corrupted and was unusable, unfortunately. I'll get you on to talk about something else, Duke, I promise. I've got 1,000,001 ideas for the next video, but I've also got my hands full making a new documentary series about Smash Brothers right now. A statement that's amazingly been true about me since 2011. Still, I'm gonna try to get something out again this year on this channel, even if it's more in the 20-minute range. Until then, I bid you all a watery farewell.